All right, everyone, welcome back into the Views from the 573 podcast. Hope you guys are doing well. We are wrapping up our NFL divisional previews. We're taking a look at the AFC East to wrap things up as we head into pretty soon, about a week from now, our first game of the NFL season with Dallas and Philadelphia kicking everything off. So we'll be doing that. Matt and I will be doing our annual NFL predictions pod. So I'm really excited about doing that as we lead up to the beginning of the season. But we got one more division to wrap up here, and we got a lot of teams here with the Bills, Dolphins, Jets, and Patriots that are. There's three that are really interesting as to where they could go from here uh, throughout the rest of the season. It does feel like the Bills are pretty much automatically going to win this division for the sixth straight year. It kind of feels like that's a given now with how this division is set up. But we're going to be talking about all of them today, what they did this all season, and talk about what we think about them heading into the season. Some stuff about where they could end up after the season if all goes well or if all goes wrong. So we'll be touching on those things as well. College football has kind of started here with week 0, so I'll be trying to do some stuff with that with college football and talking about that. And of course, we got a big weekend this weekend, big game with Ohio State and Texas to really kind of kick everything off. So really excited to be talking about this upcoming season as well. So let's dive into the AFC East, everybody. And again, this division, it feels like it's a given that the Bills are going to win this division for the sixth straight year. They won it the last 5, but there's a lot on the Bills for, because of the way that that they've been playing, into January and how they face the Ravens, Chiefs, Bengals or whoever. It's always about them coming up a little bit short in January. They do everything great from September to December, but it's about getting into January for them. And that's an overwhelming question for them. The other teams, there's a couple. It's a little bit on the other side of the spectrum. For the Patriots, who are on the opposite side of that spectrum, is how can they look with a completely new regime with Vrabel as head coach, with Drake Maye heading into year 2, with all the additions that they've made in free agency, with draft capital, all the resources they use? What's it going to look like for the Jets? New regime as well, new head coach with Aaron Glenn coming in. You got Justin Fields coming in as your quarterback. What are the Jets going to look like offensively? And then the Dolphins. Well, could this potentially be the last time we see this group of guys here in Miami be on the same team? Could this be the end of some sort of this era that they've had here with Tua, Tyreek, Waddle, Mike McDaniel? We're going to talk about all that. So there's a lot of interesting questions, I think, with all these teams that we're going to dive into. So I say, let's dive into the Buffalo Bills and let's talk about them. And first off, again, we'll talk about what they add this offseason. And on the graphic, I double checked and I put Josh Palmer there twice. So mine one of those Josh Palmers there. But as far as what they did, they extended a lot of their own guys. Josh Allen getting that big time extension, Gregory Rousseau, Christian Benford, Khalil Shakir, Terrell Bernard, all those guys keeping a lot of their homegrown guys here together for the long haul, big time extensions for all of them. And then, of course, the Josh Palmer signing, they signed him away from the Chargers. Michael Hoyt, they signed him away. Joey Bosa on that typical veteran 1-year deal to kind of help them get over the hump in January. Tre'Davious White is back as well. Elijah Moore, Larry Ogunjobi, a couple other signings there that are a little bit on the smaller side. As far as who left the team, Amari Cooper's gone, Matt Collins, Von Miller, Austin Johnson, Rasul Douglas, and they traded Kyer Elam. So, I mean, if I'm being honest, not too big of not too big losses for the departures. Von Miller, you can maybe add there. Rasul Douglas, maybe, but not too much there. And then in the draft, they went all defense with their first 4 picks and all SEC. Maxwell Harrison, the speedy corner from Kentucky, and then the next 3 picks were all on the front 7. you get TJ Sanders from South Carolina in the second. You get Landon Jackson in the third from Arkansas. And then the mountain of a man defensive tackle, Deion Walker from Kentucky in the fourth. So that's what all the Bills were up to. And let's dive into this particular aspect. And this is where we're going to lead everything off. Is this the year that the Bills can finally break through? I think that's the thing that's on everybody's mind in Buffalo with, as far as who covers the NFL. I think that's everything that's on the mind when it comes to the Bills is, can the Bills, after so many years of coming up short, can they finally break through in January, whether it's facing Lamar, facing Burrow, facing Mahomes, whether it's at Buffalo, KC, Baltimore, wherever, can they finally break through? Can they get to a Super Bowl? Much less win the Super Bowl, but can they get there? Can they get over the hump? And that's going to be the question with this group, with all that they're bringing into this offseason. And I mean, you take a look at what they did last year. One of the things that was kind of a knock on them was the run game. They could not get that figured out, but you saw some improvements. Spencer Brown, in particular, at right tackle, made a huge leap in his game. James Cook leveled up, and he got paid this offseason. So the run game really took a step up, and Joe Brady knew how to call the run game. And the great thing is that there's a lot of continuity on that side back with Brady back. A lot of those guys are back on the offensive line. Of course, you got Josh Allen. I mean, we know what he's going to do. This guy's going to be a prime MVP candidate for the next several years. With the way that he's played, and they weren't as turnover heavy last year with Buffalo on offense. Now maybe that could change, and that doesn't carry over from last year, but it feels like this offense, they got the running game figured out. I think it's now the next step is finding, okay, they moved off Stephon Diggs, is finding that next guy, but maybe they don't want to find the next guy. Maybe they're fine with just spraying the ball out and just, giving these guys their targets and not have to worry about force feeding it to any one guy. But I think eventually somebody's going to have to take a step up, kind of like James Cook did last year. Now, whether that's, a Keon Coleman or a Dalton Kincaid, whether it's one of those two guys, I feel like somebody's going to have to grow and develop into a guy, especially like Coleman, a guy that was taken where he was taken last year in the draft, is going to have to find a way to develop and be that big bodied receiver that he was drafted as, and be a red zone type of threat there when they get to that end of the field. So it feels like that's going to be the next step for this Bills offense, is get one of those guys to level up and, like James Cook did last year, like Spencer Brown did, and step up. Maybe O'Cyrus Torrence on the offensive line can too. That's another guy, another young guy that they're looking at. It's like, hey, let's go, let's get ready. So it kind of feels like that's the way that the Bills are going to be looking at, with offense in mind, as they try to get over the hump. You got Shakir, you got Curtis Samuel, you got those guys, what they're about, Dawson Knox. It's just like, who out of those young guys can level up into 2025 and really help out this Bills offense. But even if there's not a really big, step up from either of those guys, this offense is still going to be really, really good. I mean, again, you got a prime MVP candidate. You got an offense coordinator that's coming back that did really good last year. You got a good running back, good running game, good offensive line. So, I mean, the Bills should be good to go. You shouldn't have to worry about that on offense. It's just who out of Kincaid or Keon Coleman, out of those two in particular, who can really see some growth in their game and really kind of take this offense up a notch. I think you have to take that into account, if as far as if the Bills can find a way to break through. And then you take a look at, defensively, I think you're probably looking at some of those guys on defense that they brought in that are young guys too, especially the rookies. I think Maxwell Harrison is a little bit banged up at the moment, so that's not great. Can a guy like Cole Bishop on the defensive side, can he really grow into year two and seeing a more of a starting role than he had in his rookie season? The secondary, I think, is going to be the key thing. I think with Buffalo, as far as defense, it's just like, okay, you got Benford, so you got a solid guy there. Then after that, you got a couple of guys that you're bringing back that were old faces, and Tre'Davious White. Dane Jackson is coming back. And you also got a couple, they had excellent safety play, several years ago, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, those two were great on the back end. It's just figure out, okay, can we find a way to get back to that level of play on the back end, particularly at safety? Can Cole Bishop be a guy like that where he can really become a leader back there on that back end? I mean, Utah does have some good defenders, especially coming from the secondary. They produce good defenders back there. So it's just a matter of like, okay, can he, in a more where he's going to get more playing time, can he really start to grow in his game and be that type of playmaker back there that the Bills drafted him as, when they drafted him last year. So I think that's as far as another young player, that's something to also keep in mind. Can he help elevate the defense on the back end? Because again, the defense, with the secondary is that there are some question marks with that group, and if Harrison can finally, I don't know, you get a guy that's banged up already, that's going to limit how many snaps he's going to get. It's just like, can you find him some playing time, and can he get well adjusted? And he's a rookie. Rookies are going to have those bumps in the road that they'll have throughout the season. They'll have some highs and they'll have some lows. And those lows are going to come. Just don't know when. So it's just a matter of figure out when they come and figure out, okay, what can we do now? So the secondary, I think, is a question mark for them, and the defensive line. I think they add a lot of resources into this defensive line, and I think you're going to be seeing some line changes. And a lot of these guys are different body types. Now, I do think Ogunjobi and Hoyt are, I believe there's a suspension involved with both of them. I'll have to go look that up. But you bring all these guys in. Okay, yeah. Ogunjobi, Hoyt, they're suspended for the first 6 games. So you're not going to have them for, the first 6 games of the season. But other than that, I mean, you take a look at what they added. A lot of these guys have different body types. I mean, you just take a look at the guys they drafted. TJ Sanders, a little bit on the smaller side for a defensive tackle. Landon Jackson does kind of fit, the Gregory Rousseau type of mold here, Epinesa, where they're just big, long, and strong defensive ends that can really help out in the run game. And then you have Deion Walker, who again is like 6'6", 6'7", something like that, 340, 350. Yeah, just a mountain of a man, and you have him, rotating in alongside Daquan Jones, and then you got Ed Oliver too. So it's just you got all these different body types that you can mix and match with on the defensive front and really play around with. I think Walker could give them something to add in the run game and really being able to help that out with Milano and Bernard. And they aren't the flashiest linebackers in the world, but they get the job done. So I think this front seven, it should be fun to watch with all the different line changes that you're bringing in. And then Rousseau got paid. Epinesa, you bring him back. Landon Jackson should be a fun watch, see how he grows. And then Bosa again is the typical veteran. Hey, can we get at least 11 games out of him? Can he help us out later on in January and February, where we're gonna need a guy like him? Can he stay moderately healthy throughout the season and play like 20 snaps, on that side of the ball? Again, with the whole rotating thing, you're going to be able to do that. So can you find those right snaps, those right downs where you're like, okay, we're going to send Bosa out there? Can you find those? Can you get to those passing downs where you're like, okay, we're going to send Bosa out there? And he's a little bit older, but he can still get the job done. It's just a matter of him being healthy and him being available. So I think, I feel like that's a move that could end up working out better than the Von Miller one did. It's not for big, insane money, it's only a 1 year deal. So I think as far as that goes, it makes a lot more sense. It lines up there with that. So I think this defensive line, you bring in several different guys, several different body types in there. They're going to be able to do a lot of mismatching with those guys on what down is it? Is it a pass down? Is it a run down? What formation is the offense showing? I think they're going to be able to do a whole lot there. But again, it's a lot of relying on these guys that they've drafted over the last couple years to really pick it up quick and grow and develop and be those pieces that you can lean on. Because, I mean, looking at what they did, a lot of it is keeping their own guys with them and giving them big time contracts. And so you're just honestly looking for guys that you can say, like, hey, we got value deals here with these guys that are good, that are developing, that we know are guys that we can build around for the future, knowing that we have all these contracts on the books. So I think that's something to keep in mind with as well. So again, I think the Bills are going to be a team that's going to win. They're going to win this division. I think there's no debate about that. I feel like this is one of the easier picks, but it's just a matter of can they get over the hump? Can they, if they go to Arrowhead in January, can they overcome that hump? If they go to Baltimore in January, same thing, or vice versa. If they come to Buffalo, can they hold on at home and push through and get past them, get to the Super Bowl, and if they win it, that's great. But I think as far as Buffalo fans, just get to the Super Bowl, find a way to get past those guys in KC, Baltimore, Cincinnati, those guys, find a way to push through those guys and make it to the big one, make it to the big game. So I think that's going to be the key thing with Buffalo this year. It's just like, can they make it past those giants, if you will, that have stood in front of them and that they've tried to go through and just haven't over the last few years. That's going to be the thing with Buffalo. So again, offensively, I really have no questions. I'm excited to see Palmer in this offense. Is a guy that can separate a little bit, is a big X. But a lot of it I think is dependent on Coleman and Kincaid, how they go about this year. They had some moments last year. Can they continue to go along? And then defensively, it's just a secondary. It's just like, okay, how will this look here, and can this be a secondary that can hold up into January? And get and be able to be a secondary that you can count on at that point when you're going against those elite level quarterbacks. So I think that's where we're going to leave it off for the Buffalo Bills. Up, let's talk about the Miami Dolphins. I'm going in order of my notes here. Let's talk about the Dolphins, what they brought in this offseason, and really only one big notable free agency deal, and that is James Daniels, bringing him over from Pittsburgh, 3 years, $24 million. And then other than that, there's a lot of small deals with Zach Wilson, Ashton Davis, Melifonwu, Nick Westbrook-Akine, the deep ball king. So he's gonna be missed in Nashville. Tyrell Dodson, KJ Britt, Alexander Mattson, who I believe is out for the year. And then, of course, the Minka Fitzpatrick acquisition a little bit later on this offseason with the Jalen Ramsey trade and Jonnu Smith going to Pittsburgh as well. Raheem Mostert is gone. Teron Armstead has retired. The big hole there at left tackle, and so Patrick Paul is hoping to fill in that role. Robert Jones, Calais Campbell, Anthony Walker, and Javon Holland. That's a big one on the back end of the defense. And then as far as the draft, got Kenneth Grant, the big defensive tackle from Michigan, Jonas Savaiinaea from Arizona, the big guard in the second round, and trade up to get him. And then a lot of other picks in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round, including Jordan Phillips, another defensive tackle from Maryland. Jordan Marshall, I believe that's actually supposed to be Jason Marshall from Florida here that I have in my notes. Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State, and then Quinn Ewers in the 7th. from Texas at 231, taking a little bit later. So as far as the Dolphins in 2025, we touched on this a little bit. Can this be it for this iteration of the Dolphins? I do think one thing to take in consideration with that is that I think Mike McDaniel is a good coach. I think it's just like how the Dolphins have been constructed here has not been the best. I think you take a look at this Miami Dolphins roster, and there's a lot of guys that are stars, but some of those stars have left. Some of them have gone. Some of them have retired. Teron Armstead. You trade Jalen Ramsey, and Javon Holland is now gone. So there's a lot of stars there, but some of those guys have gotten a little bit older and getting paid big time money. Tyreek's cap hit, I believe. I mean, it's insane. So you got a lot of those guys, and there's not a whole lot of talented young guys that are in the pipeline. Now, I think you hope that Kenneth Grant, Savanea can be guys that are in that grouping. But right now, it feels like it's only Chop Robinson at this point in the game. And it feels like they need a little bit more in this group to really feel good about where they're heading into the next few years. And there's also the overlying question of Tua and his health and his availability and like how many games is he going to play? Can he be well protected? That's the thing that's going to be that keeps this Dolphins offense moving is if Tua is healthy and he is available and keeping him upright. And now you're looking at Patrick Paul, who's a second-year player, stepping into that left tackle role. You're going to be counting on him to help out there. Austin Jackson as well. There's a couple pieces you lost there. And so you hope Savanea and James Daniels can help out a little bit in pass protection to keep Tua upright and make sure he's not touched, he's healthy. Because, again, when they are healthy, this offense is really good when he's out there on the field. And you got Hill, Waddle, or one of the two, preferably both, but you have at least one of the two. So I think that's going to be what's going to be the thing to keep an eye on for the Dolphins this year is just getting and finding those guys that you can build around in as far as those young guys. Can some of those later round guys that they took, can they potentially be added to that grouping? I think that's a big thing with Miami is like, again, you take a look at this group and there's not a whole lot of young guys that you can look at. It's like, okay, there's building blocks here that we can build around, So I think, they just been in this kind of like, hey, we think of ourselves as we're an elite AFC team. We got our quarterback. We got two of the fastest receivers in the game. We got excellent play caller, a guy that can call up an excellent offensive game plan from week to week. But I think at this point now, you got to question, like, what are the Dolphins going to be this year? And then where are they going to be heading into 2026 and beyond? And I think a lot of that is dependent on if Tua is healthy. Now, if he's healthy, then you're like, okay, we know he's our guy. But if he's not, then you have to, I think, really start to question, like, okay, this guy can't stay healthy. When he's healthy, we're good, but there's been more times than not that he's not been on the field. And the best ability is availability, especially at that all critical position that is quarterback. And if you don't have that there, I mean, you might as well write yourself off. And you might as well go to Cancun for the off season, because if you don't have that, you're not making it to the playoffs. So that's going to be the thing I think to watch with Miami. It's a talented group, but they're a little bit older. They got a lot of rich contracts there, so that's something to think about. Now, I will say, defensive line wise, I think they're really talented. They're a really good group. You add Kenneth Grant to this group. It does feel like with both the lines, they sought out more physicality, sought out to get bigger, more physical, more aggressiveness. They sought that out. Going back to the defensive line. Kenneth Grant is a big part of that. Big defensive tackle out of Michigan. Jordan Phillips as well, big defensive tackle from Maryland. So You get a couple of those guys, but that is a good group if they can stay healthy. That's been the crux of the matter with Phillips and Chubb the last couple years. They could not stay healthy for the life of them and miss a whole lot of time. Chubb, if I remember right, didn't even play football last year. So you're bringing him into the fold here, a year after he didn't play. So you got him and Phillips, who's recovering from, I believe, an ACL, and you got them coming back alongside Grant on the interior. You got Chop Robinson, who is a different type of pass rusher than those two guys, who offers a little bit more speed, is a little bit on the smaller side, but again, has really come into his own in the NFL. And then you got Zach Sealer as well, good defensive tackle. So there's a lot to like about this Miami Dolphins defensive line. And I think they can really help out things. It's just, can they be on the field? It's the same thing kind of with Tua. Can they be on the field to be able to be productive and help this team out? Because if they are, then it's a really good defensive line. There's a lot of talent here with this group. Phillips is talented. Chubb is talented. We know about that. Chop Robinson, is another guy. You come in on passing downs. You bring him in and have him do his thing. Zealer's good. Kenneth Grant has potential to be really good here. But it's just a matter of, can they stay healthy? And then offensive line wise, Patrick Paul replacing Armstead. Armstead, I mean, we know how uber talented he is. That's going to be something to watch. Even though it's not to his blind side, it's still part of the offensive line as a whole. Is like, can he keep Tua upright? And can he be a physical presence on that offensive line, along with Savanea and James Daniels? It feels like that's the type of thing that Miami wants to do, be more physical in the run game. And McDaniel's a good run game caller. He can call a good run game. His run designs are really good. Achane is a really good back out of the backfield. And you don't have Mostert, so you're probably going to be looking at guys like Ollie Gordon or Jalen Wright now out of that backfield to really kind of help pick up the load. Because especially now, Achane is going to be missing the first few games of the season. So if you're the Dolphins, you're already the run game is already going to kind of suffer here in the first couple of weeks of the season, because you don't have your number one lead back. So you don't have him up there, and you can't really figure out, okay, how can we get this run game going with those guys until a few weeks on into the season. So I think that's going to be one of the things, that was to get more physical up front and just really kind of find a way to move guys on both sides of the ball. And can they find something there with those guys? So I think for Miami, this is going to be, I think, a critical season, just to figure out where they're at right now and where they're heading down the road. Again, I don't think it's necessarily the regime's fault. Mike McDaniel and the GM. I don't think it's necessarily their. Well, I would say it's not Mike McDaniel's fault with how the roster is constructed, but so I think whatever happens this season, Miami. Miami feels like could be in a spot where they could not be great, or they could be in that wild card team. But I think that's, if everything goes right, they would still be at least be a wild card team. But that's also not good enough. So this Miami Dolphins team should be interesting to see how this season plays out. And, again, everything starts with Tua. Can he stay upright? Can he stay healthy? And can the offensive line do a good job? That's going to be the thing. So Miami, there's their season, there's their 25 preview right there. It's just a lot of question marks right there. A lot of question marks about health. Can they find some young guys that can help step up and be a part of that group where they can build around those guys? A lot of questions down in South Beach for sure. Big Apple now. Let's talk about the other New York team. We already talked about the Giants. Now let's go and let's talk about the Jets, the Jets, Jets. And they had a offseason full of changes here, starting off with hiring Aaron Glenn as their head coach, Tanner Engstrom as the offensive coordinator, bringing him over from the Lions. You also bring in Steve Wilkes as the defensive coordinator, and you bring in a lot of guys this offseason. Also, a lot of guys you're bringing back with new deals. Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner. I don't believe they're on the graphic, but big time deals for them. Garrett Wilson, 4 years, 130 million, 89 guaranteed. Sauce Gardner, 4 years, 120, 85 guaranteed. Jamian Sherwood, the linebacker, is back as well, 3 years, 45. They bring in Justin Fields. Big notable outside signing for them, 2 years, 40 million, 30 million guaranteed. And Brandon Stevens comes in as well, Andre Cisco, Josh Reynolds, Isaiah Oliver, Josh Myers. And then recently they traded for one of their big needs in defensive tackle Harrison Phillips from Minnesota. Departures: Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Tyron Smith, who retired. And that's kind of weird to say that he's retired. He's been in the league for a long time. Hassan Reddick, Javon Kinlaw, CJ Mosley, DJ Reed, Ashton Davis, they are all gone. And then in the draft, beefed up that offensive line a little bit more. Took Armand Membu, the offensive tackle from Missouri, at 7 overall. In the second round, they went and took Mason Taylor, the tight end from LSU. Third round, Azariah Thomas, the long corner from Florida State. And then fourth round made a couple SEC picks. The speedster Arian Smith from Georgia at 110 in the fourth. And then Malachi Moore, the safety from Alabama, also in the fourth round. So, talking about the New York Jets this season, what is this team going to exactly look like on offense? I think that's going to be the question here. It's because I don't know if Fields, if he recorded a pass in the preseason or not, but at some point he is going to have to throw a pass. He is going to have to. It just cannot be a academy school type of offense or wishbone, flexbone, triple option type of offense. Even though the Jets got the personnel to do it. They got the personnel to do it, and it probably wouldn't work in the NFL, but they got the personnel to do it. Because you got Fields, who's a lethal ball carrier, Brees Hall, Braylon Allen is a big physical back who's also got some smoothness this game, and Isaiah Davis is another decent back. So they got the guys that do it, and I think they also potentially got the offensive line. But just because, again, it's kind of like we're going to talk about this with the Patriots too, and we talked about with a couple other lines too. Just because you put the resources in it doesn't mean it's going to be good. But they have put a lot of high-profile resources into the last couple of years. You took Fashanu last year. You took Membu this past draft. And you got Vera Tucker in there, John Simpson, Joe Tippmann they've taken the last couple of years. So they got the horses for that, but it's not going to be like that, And Angstrom coming over from Detroit, I'm sure he would like to lean on that, coming from how physical Detroit was up front with their run game. So I imagine he would want to bring some of that stuff over there to the Jets. But also, Fields is a little bit of he's a different quarterback than what Goff is, where Fields can get out of the pocket, make some plays out there. Goff that's not his comfort, it's not comfort zone at all. So I think just what is this offense going to look like? I imagine if I had to say what this offense is going to look like, it's going to be predicated on a physical run game with some play action shots that are going to be involved and trying to get it to your playmakers. But that's another thing. Who are the playmakers? Because we know Garrett Wilson is one. Who are going to be the other guys? Because outside of Garrett Wilson, the other guys that they have on this roster, you're like, oh, okay. It's not really a strong group there, which maybe I feel like I would have liked to see some more resources, at least try to build it up a little bit. But, you bring in Josh Reynolds, and I don't know I don't think that's much of a help there. And so it's going to be really predicated on this physical run game and play action passing game with Garrett Wilson involved, and just trying to figure out, okay, who can be a number 2 option in this offense. Can it be Mason Taylor, out of LSU? Can he be that type of guy right there, that's going to be the thing. Just taking a look at the Jets depth chart. I mean, again, there's not a whole lot to be excited about with the skill position guys. So it feels like a lot of this offseason is going to be predicated on just having that big time run game going and then getting stuff off of play action on that and just figure out, okay, how can you work with Fields? I mean, that's going to be the other thing. Fields, his third stop. Can this be a Sam Darnold type of situation where can we at least find something with him within this group, within this offense? I will say this is probably going to be, it should be the best pass protection he should get in all the stops. We know how it was at Chicago. We don't need to relitigate that. Pittsburgh, it wasn't the best. Broderick Jones struggled a little bit. And yes, this is a group that has a lot of they got two young tackles here, but there's a lot of upside within both of them. And it should offer him really good pass protection where that clock isn't sped up and then he doesn't have to be all herky jerky in the pocket and all that stuff where he's like, oh, it feels like when that happens, when he gets good protection, it's going to be like, oh, wow, this is what it's like, having good protection in the NFL as a quarterback, having, a full pocket where you're not being harassed or anything like that, like he was in Chicago or Pittsburgh, where it's just like a clean pocket, nobody's coming after him. So I think that's going to be kind of like, oh wow, it's going to be kind of a shock when he gets to that point. So it's just he's going to have to make plays as a passer in this offense, even if it's going to be predicated on a run game. And I feel like that is the type of game Aaron Glenn will want to have with this team. It wants to be physical on both sides and be aggressive and just be a feisty type of team that's going to cause all kinds of headaches for the opposing teams on offense and defense. I feel like that's going to be what he's going to lean into with him being the head coach of this New York Jets team. And I mean, you take a look at, the defensive side of things. I think, he did a great job last year with Detroit because if you remember that Lions defense was injury laden, like it feels like guys were going out every week. And he did a great job of maintaining the ship and keeping it afloat and making sure that it was a good enough defense. And like they were, again, they were hit with injuries all year long. And they just kept chugging along, kept on going, and did their thing. So you got a guy that knows what he's doing as a coach. He got the most out of those guys. And I think you take a look at this Jets defense, a couple years ago they were really good. And then, they kind of slipped a little bit last year. Can he get them to be that type of defense they were a couple of years ago? Can he get them to be like that? Now, I will say he's got some guys up there that he should be really excited about with this Jets team. Of course, you got Quinnen Williams up front. I mean, you got a stud defensive tackle there. That's a good start. You got other guys like Will Campbell, Jermaine Johnson that are coming into their own. Really productive young players that are looking to take that next step forward, but have been productive so far. So you bring them in. You got Sauce Gardner on the back end, so you know what one side of the field is going to be locked up. It's just can you figure out, okay, what are the other pieces on this defense that are going to be able to help bring that defense back to the 2023 level? And we talked about, with Harrison Phillips, one of their issues was that other defensive tackle spot besides Quinnen Williams. Phillips is a capable starter at defensive tackle, so you get a guy in there, plug him in there. It's like, okay, boom. You don't have to worry about, starting, other guys like Derek Nandi, Brian Coward on the opposite side of Quinnen Williams. So you don't have to worry about that. So they're depth pieces. I think it's also just figuring out, okay, can we figure out who's going to be, can Brandon Stevens be a serviceable second corner? DJ Reed was really good for them. Can he step into that role this year for this for this Jets team. Can he be like? Can he step into that role? Andre Cisco as well. Can he help out on the back end and help out with the safety play? So this defense feels like, I think Aaron Glenn does have the coaching chops to get this defense back to what it was a couple years ago. Maybe not at that same level, but maybe a couple spots below where they were ranked in 2023. So I think that's going to be the thing to watch with this Jets team. It's going to be a physical group on both sides again. Physical run game, physical defense. They're going to be feisty. They're going to be a team. I think if you can figure out, okay, what do you have in Fields? I think that's going to be really key. If you're like, okay, maybe, hey, he's fine, we can roll into another year with him. Then if you're the Jets, like, cool. But if he's not, it's like, okay, listen, it's a rich quarterback class. We can take one of those guys and we can roll and develop him with Glenn as the coach. So I think a lot of it's going to be on Fields and like, what can he be this year? How much can he improve with a better pocket? Can he make those throws that Tanner Angstrom is going to ask him to make within this offense? That's going to be the thing. The Jets do feel like they're going to be a little bit more exciting, especially with that physical run game, and a little bit more intriguing than they have been in the past. They should be a whole lot more exciting and fun to watch and to talk about with that physical run game that they have. They're going to be a scrappy physical team. That's going to be their MO. They're going to look to wreck shop and just kick butts and take names. I feel like that's going to be kind of the identity of this Jets team in 2025. So I think that's where we're going to leave it off with the New York. We got the New England Patriots to talk about, and boy, did they have a busy offseason, and there's no time to waste here. A couple of big time additions to their coaching staff. Mike Vrabel is coming back after taking a year off and not being a head coach from the Titans. Comes back to his old stomping grounds in New England, becomes a head coach. Josh McDaniels is back in New England as well. Terrell Williams, who was with Vrabel in Tennessee for a couple years, he's now the defensive coordinator. So you bring those guys in, and then as far as their all-season additions, whole lot of new guys. Stephon Diggs, Matt Collins, you looked at add them to help out the receiver room. And then a lot of additions on defense too. A couple offensive line additions. Morgan Moses to kind of be that, can we get competent right tackle play? Even though this guy's a little bit older, so you bring him in as a free agent. So you bring in Garrett Bradbury as well to kind of maybe a stopgap type of center there and see how that works. And then on defense, a lot of other additions. Harold Landry, kind of the typical, hey, let's bring him over. I know him from this one stop type of guy in Harold Landry, who Vrabel knows is going to set the tone and is going to be a guy that's going to kind of get the culture, get going where it needs to be. So you bring him in, Robert Spillane as well, Carlton Davis, Milton Williams, and that's a big one right there. So a lot of defensive heavy acquisitions here in free agency. As far as departures, David Andrews retired, Jacoby Brissett, they traded Joe Milton, Dietrich Wise, Jonathan Jones. Those are just to name a few. And then in the draft, a lot of draft picks too that we're gonna talk about here. Will Campbell, 4th overall, the offensive tackle from LSU. Trayvon Henderson from Ohio State in the 2nd round. Kyle Williams in the 3rd, the receiver from Washington State. Also, Jared Wilson, the guard / center from Georgia in the 3rd as well. And then the 4th, Craig Woodson, the safety from Cal. And then also Joshua Farmer, the defensive tackle from Florida State. I think where we're going to start off here with the Patriots, there's a couple things here. Is can they be a team that can be a sleeper team that we can look at as like, oh, hey, don't look, but the Patriots are playing some decent football right now. Maybe that can be the case here because, you take a look at, it feels like it's an upgraded head coach. You also got to take into account of a potential second-year quarterback leap. and the defense should be a little bit better, even though it's not at its full form yet, but should be better. And then you also got an easy schedule. You got a fourth place schedule. Could they potentially find a chance there to make a little bit of noise and be a team that we can see in November and December and be like, oh, look at the Patriots. They're playing some decent ball right now. So I think you got to take into those variables as to what the Patriots brought in this offseason. Because, I mean, you do take a look at this offseason. There are very clear indicators of a team that was bad a year ago that's throwing all their resources at the wall. You got the cap space. Let's go heavy in free agency. Let's sign some guys, some big time contracts. You got a lot of draft capital, and we're picking high in every round. Let's go and get some of these guys. But I will say it's a better starting point for Maye now than it was a year ago, because last year he did not have a functional offensive line. This year it should be at least functional. Again, should be, but the talent level is a whole lot better than what it was a year ago. I mean, even though he's older, Morgan Moses is still a solid tackle. Jared Wilson should be solid. Will Campbell, there's still some limitations with his game that a lot of people have questions about. Can he hold up as a left tackle in the NFL? But he's a whole lot better than the tackle play that they were getting at that spot last year. And then you also got Michael Winwu that's back as a right guard, and Bradbury's at center, and that's fine. So this offensive line, it should be a unit that I think at the very least you can expect it to be just a few notches better than what it was. It's more talented. It's more functional. It should be more functional. So it feels like it's a decent starting point with Maye. You got proper protection. And even though there's some questions about the skill position players, like what are you going to get out of Stephon Diggs here when he's 31, 32, and he's coming off an injury? What are you going to get out of a guy like Pop Douglas, Kyle Williams, who's a third round pick? The weapons are marginally better than what they were last year, than what you had last year. Now, it feels like Diggs, they've been raving about him over the course of the offseason, about what he's able to bring. Like, I feel like if he's a steadying presence for a guy like Drake Maye, then I think that's a huge plus heading in with a young quarterback who's in the second year, is only 22 years old. I think that's a huge plus, and being able to have him in your group. So I think, and listen, while it again, there's all the hallmarks of what a bad team does, it is a better starting point for Drake Maye. Now, looking at these contracts, there's a lot of, again, there's a lot of like contracts here that you could take a look at a year from now, and they could potentially not be so great. Like, I mean, the Harold Landry one, again, is a guy that Ray was bringing in because he knew him from Tennessee, and he's fine now. He's solid. And you also bring in Spillane on a big deal. He's solid. Diggs, again, at his age and coming off an injury, that's a big deal. Milton Williams, that's a big deal as well. Carlton Davis, it feels like they don't add up to the timeline to what they are. And again, it's not the final form, but at least it's like we're doing this now so that it feels like they're doing this now so they can get to a point where like they're able to bring in those guys that are worthy of these types of deals. But again, it does feel like some of these guys in a year from now, they could be bad contracts. They could not pan out. As much as I think a lot of Patriots fans are excited to see Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez just make life miserable for all these receivers, it's you got Gonzalez, who's a young ascending player. Davis is on the other side of that. He's still good, but as far as timeline wise, a little bit older and does not necessarily fit. So while you're excited about that and that pairing, there's a question mark there with Carlton Davis as far as he's concerned. So Milton Williams is kind of the same thing, and he's getting paid to be a centerpiece of this defense. So I think when you got a guy that's coming off of what he did in Philadelphia, and he was really good, but it was a specific role, and he was rotating in, not a full-time player, and now he's getting paid top of the line defensive tackle money. in this role. So it's just like, what are you going to expect from this? One thing I think that does help is you do have Christian Barmore, who looks like he's healthy. He's going to be ready to go. So you do have a nice defensive tackle pairing there. Then you got Keanu White that you can put him wherever you want to as well. But those contracts could be looked at in a year from now as not being so great. It's just like they do. Timeline wise, there's a couple question marks there with where they fit as far as this group, as far as this Patriots team with the players that they got. So it feels like that could be a very serious question to have in a year from now. But this defense should be really good. They should be good. Again, it's not final form, but this defense should be a solid unit. I think it's going to be scrappy. They're going to be feisty. You know, they're going to play physical style football. That's Vrabel's type of style right there. Spillane fits right there, really perfectly with that type of play. Landry is physical too. And then you get Barmore back. So this defense should be a whole lot more physical. But, it's just also you got a first year play caller in Terrell Williams as well, managing this defense. So what is it going to look like, and how much of Vrabel's fingerprints is going to be on this defense? I think that's going to be something to watch there. And also, going back to the skill position players, and you got Josh McDaniels coming back. You took a gap year. What did he learn? What was he come up with that he's going to use here in this stint with the Patriots and this stint as an offensive play caller? What is he going to use, and what is he going to bring with a young rookie quarterback? And how much is he going to put on his plate? You can put too much on a young quarterback's plate and it all, go sideways. But then I think the Patriots feel like Maye is capable of that and being able to put that much on his plate and just watch him go. And again, the skill position players look a whole lot better than what they were. Like, I do think another benefactor besides Drake Maye and all this of a good offensive line is this run game with Ramondre Stevenson and Trayvon Henderson. It feels like those are going to be a dynamic duo. Henderson is explosive out of the backfield. He can catch as well. He's had a couple of splash plays in preseason. So I think there's a lot of excitement around him and the element he's going to bring to this offense. And I think McDaniels is going to love having him in this offense. So I think that those are elements that could really be beneficial for a better offensive line this year. But it's just like what is Josh McDaniels going to bring to this offense this year with the skill position players, with again an older Stephon Diggs, with a third round pick and Kyle Williams that they're excited about, but it's still a third round pick. Like, what are you going to get from these types of guys in this Josh McDaniels offense that he took a year off and trying to figure out what does he want as a play caller. So I think that's going to be something to watch, for this Patriots team. And just, I think, with going back to the whole contracts thing, if they are able to find some guys to build around, some clear building blocks, okay, like Maye looks like, okay, he's going to be the guy. He's a clear star, ascending quarterback that we have here. I think that's, if you have that at the end of the year, if you're the Patriots, then you're playing with house money as far as what you can do. You got cap space next year that you can play around with. Can you have other guys be those building blocks? Can Campbell, Henderson, Kyle Williams be those guys? And on defense, can Williams, Barmore, Gonzalez, Keon White, can those be the guys you build around heading into 2026 and beyond? So listen, there's a lot to be excited about with the Patriots, but there's a couple question marks with those contracts with those guys that paid that money to. Can Milton Williams live up to that type of money? Can Carlton Davis, be that guy that can play alongside Christian Gonzalez, and even though he doesn't necessarily fit the timeline, but can he help out this group? We'll have to see, but I think there's a lot of excitement in New England heading into the second year of the Drake Maye era, with Vrabel coming back as the head coach after playing there years ago, with Josh McDaniels coming back as the play caller, with a couple more excitement, a couple of exciting players on offense with Henderson and Kyle Williams. And then on defense, you bring in Williams, and then you continue to watch Christian Gonzalez ascend and see Barmore hopefully stay on the field and be healthy. There's a lot of excitement, I think, in New England heading into this year. It's just what how will this translate? How will these moves translate into what we see on the field heading into 2025? So I think that's where we're going to leave it off with the AFC East, everybody. Another preview out the books, and that's our final preview. And that means it is going to be prediction time next week. And I'm looking forward to doing that one with Matt. Actually, I am taping this preview the day of him and I supposed to be taping the predictions pod. So doing 2 pods in one day, and so we'll be doing that hopefully later on today, and really excited about doing that. So we'll already have that taped, when this pod comes out. So again, gonna be a fun one. So everybody, that's gonna do it for this edition of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in throughout all these previews on YouTube, on Apple, Spotify, wherever you guys get your podcasts. Thank you guys for sticking around, and as we dive into these teams, into all these divisions, and see what's up with them and heading into this upcoming season. So everybody, that'll do it for us here. Hopefully you guys have a good rest of your day, and we will talk to you guys soon.